Lately, I've been thinking about the pictures that I haven't taken. And by that, I don't mean the pictures that I might still take one day in the future. No, I mean the pictures that I missed and that I might not be able to take again. The times when I didn't have my camera on me, or when the roll of film tore in my camera, when the shutter seized up and there were no pictures on the roll, or even corrupted memory cards that may have swallowed all the pictures that I took. And of course, there are also the pictures where I simply messed up. Pictures that could have been great, but where I badly messed up the framing or the exposure. There were many pictures like that, of course, over the years. I've been a photographer for a very long time. I guess there have been many, many more pictures that I messed up than that I actually got right. That's kind of part of the game, I suppose. And of course, I don't remember all of them. But there are some where I'm still kicking myself to this day that I missed them. For example, while I was living in Brighton in the UK, one day I came around a corner after I was walking in the lanes and suddenly I stood in front of an elephant. That's such a Brighton thing to happen, right? But I didn't have any camera on me. And this was at a time when smartphones were still in their infancy. And I didn't have one yet and didn't get one until many years later. So I have no proof that there was an elephant in the street, or whether I was just imagining things or, right. 20 years later, I still think about that elephant sometimes. And then there was another day in Brighton where I crossed the street while listening to Nick Cave on my iPod. Yes, those were the days. And then I suddenly saw a guy who kind of made me laugh because he looked like Nick Cave with a mustache, and it seemed so fitting. Well, at the time, Nick Cave was living in Hove, and he also had a mustache, so that actually was him. And I don't have proof because I didn't have a camera on me. And I also think about that one because if I had crossed the street in that moment and I had been already taking street pictures at the time, which I didn't take any street photography in Brighton back then, I would have taken that picture just because I would have found him interesting looking. And that's another picture I missed, also because I didn't take pictures at the time so much. One phenomenon that interests me the most about these kinds of pictures are the kinds of rolls where you take pictures and in the end the pictures disappear into the ether because something went entirely wrong. Like, for example, that the shutter seized up, or that the film tore off the canister, or whatever else might happen. You might have forgotten to put film into your camera in the first place. Certainly did that once or twice. So these kinds of things happen. And what I find the most fascinating about them is that in your mind, these rolls are always perfect. There's nothing wrong with any of the pictures. There are definitely 12 out of 12 keepers if you're shooting 6x6, or 36 out of 36, because you can't really be disappointed by the pictures that actually came out. You can't look at them. So in your mind, they would have been absolute bangers, all of them. And you lost them because you messed up. And that's something really strange, a strange feeling of potential perfection that is not at all realistic, of course. I call these ghost rolls because they're kind of like ghosts in a way. There were, of course, never any pictures there, but for that time when you were still on the walk, they're still on there and they're potentially perfect, they're potential masterworks, and then they just disappear into the ether and are gone forever. Like ghosts. And don't bother looking up this term on Google. I completely made that up. And if you Google ghost rolls, then you find nothing to do with film photography. So I totally made that up and I'm perfectly fine with that. But I just find it so fitting because there was something and then it disappeared into thin air, like ghosts. And this is actually, in the film sense, it is actually true because there is an image that is on the film before you develop it, but they might disappear if you mess up the development or whatever. So ghostly images that just disappear. And I find that quite fascinating because it gives film photography a special kind of magic where things exist and then they might disappear. I like that. I haven't taken that many ghost rolls over the years because usually something like this happens with cameras that are unreliable. And I stopped shooting unreliable cameras many years ago. I had some of these with my Zorki, for example, and also with a Canon that has a motor winder, and that tends to tear off film if you hand load or spool your film yourself, and it just might detach from the canister and then they're like stuck in the camera, and once you open it, it's exposed and you can't really rescue them. Some of these rolls I keep, for example, this one here. This is a Kodak Gold roll that I had in my waterproof camera. What is it? Also a Canon Sure Shot something or other. And that one is fully automatic and motorized, but the rewind doesn't work on it anymore. And I only noticed that when I opened the camera and the roll was just looking at me, sadly, on the wrong side of the camera. So I kept it, and now I use it for testing purposes, because then I can just pull it out and don't worry about it. So if I have a camera that I have to test whether the film plane is aligned or something like that, I would pull this out and try it like that. But this roll is rather special because I messed it up twice and actually loaded it into my Leica, thinking that it was just a regular roll of Kodak Gold. I mean, just because I have a university degree doesn't mean necessarily that I can read, because it says on here that it was pulled out and I still loaded it into my Leica. Oh well, sometimes I don't pay attention. Here's another ghost roll that detached from the canister and I just kept it. Also because this is Kodak Vision free and it has the remjet layer, which is completely black, and it's nice to demonstrate it, to show it on video, for example. I thought I would make a video on Kodak Vision free at some point, so I kept it. Of course, I don't remember any of the pictures that I would have taken on these rolls, because it kind of fades like a dream after you've woken up. For a brief moment, while you're still half asleep, you might think, oh, that would make a great short story, and you try to remember everything about it. And then either it goes away completely, or you realize that it is actually a complete and utter jumbled mess that makes no sense whatsoever and has no potential whatsoever either. And pictures like that also feel like the kind of projects that we might want to do one day, but then never get around to doing. The crafting projects and the things that we gather materials for and then never actually make. Or, you know, musical instruments that we buy and never use. Okay, I'm a musician, I actually use them, but I used to have a MIDI keyboard that I never used and never made any music with it, because that was a project for some time in the future, a potentiality far, far away, and we just keep them around because of the potential of it. And you can't really go back to fix your mistakes either. It's also the kind of things that you regret not doing, or the mistakes that you might have made and think, oh, I should have done X instead of Y, because in hindsight you realize that Y made you unhappy. But that doesn't necessarily mean that X would have made you any happier. So there is something there that is a potential of perfection, but that isn't really real, because you can't go back to change your decisions and try out that timeline. That's not how it works for us, sadly. With ghost rolls, we can still dream though. They stay in our memory, and the picture of the elephant would have been perfect, and my crowning masterpiece, and the achievement of a lifetime, of course. In a way, I also think that gear acquisition syndrome, has something to do with this potentiality of perfection. Because you think if you only had that one fancy camera, that all your photographic problems will be a thing of the past, and that you will only take fantastic pictures thereafter. Like you dream of the Leica or of the fancy camera that can take all sorts of video, and you think of all the pictures that you might take and the videos that you might make, and then it just sits on the shelf gathering dust. Because just having a fancy camera doesn't necessarily mean that we know how to use it, or that we actually have the time to use it. A fancy camera is not going to make your morning commute any more interesting than it would have been otherwise. That's just the reality of things. But we try to solve these kinds of problems of inspiration with gear, even though you can't really solve problems that way. Retail therapy isn't a long-term solution, I would say. I mean, it helps for a bit. It keeps things interesting to have nice new things to play with, and it helps, yes, but it won't solve the underlying cause of why you want to have more gear in the first place. It's a temporary fix that might solve your immediate problem of not having inspiration, but in the long run, you will come back to the exact same feeling that somehow something is missing, and if only you had one more lens or one more camera body, it would all be solved. And it's just some psychological tricks that our mind plays on us and makes us buy things we don't need. And I'm guilty of that myself, so I'm not shaming anyone. I'm doing the same thing. The only thing that can actually be solved with retail therapy is ghost rolls, ironically, because unreliable cameras tend to be the culprit. And I haven't really had that many since I bought my Leica in 2014. I didn't have the shutter seize up on me or ruin an entire roll like that. No, that never happened to me. I also know how to load it really well, so I also can't mess that up. It's really easy to load. And I had far fewer ghost rolls, only maybe the rolls where I messed up the development in some way, and those still remained. And usually there are still some pictures there, unless you don't check your developer before using it, and that has only happened to me once, and not with the Leica. With a camera that is actually reliable and fancy, you can't really blame the camera anymore for your mistakes or your lack of inspiration, and that might actually lead you to solving the problem. If you can, of course. I mean, we can't all move to major cities and to places with amazing landscapes and so on. Sometimes we just live in boring surroundings and we have to somehow make do and still try to take pictures. Or maybe we don't. That's, I guess, up to everyone to decide. So why have I been thinking about these roles or this phenomenon when it doesn't actually happen to me anymore? Well, precisely because they don't happen anymore. And there's something kind of sad about that, because these ethereal, kind of ghostly pictures that are there and then disappear and are perfect in a way, there's something about them, and they make some part of, for example, the magic of film photography. Our cameras are much more reliable nowadays. Also, with digital, you get things like second card slots. So SD cards might not corrupt your images anymore. And this kind of thing just doesn't happen anymore because cameras warn us when there is no SD card inside. Fancy features that most film cameras didn't have and that prevent us from messing things up so badly. We always have cameras with us nowadays in the form of our phone, although they don't really guarantee that we get the pictures. And maybe what we get out of them is actually more disappointing than the pictures that we didn't take. For example, if I had had my phone on the day the elephant stood in front of me, I probably would have taken a picture, and it probably would have been quite pants, because my phone isn't really meant for taking pictures, and I didn't buy my phone to be a great camera. So I would probably never look at the picture again because, well, it would be quite boring. And in my mind, the picture of the elephant keeps coming back to me, whereas the picture that I would have taken probably wouldn't have worked out. Ironic, isn't it? So there's a little bit of magic that has sadly disappeared from our lives with more reliable cameras. And that's in a way a good thing, because who wants to have ruined an entire roll of film when film is so expensive these days? So it's good in a way, but it's also kind of taking away the magic a little bit. I mean, there's a reason why people want to put light leak overlays over their pictures or add film damage with plugins in Photoshop, because there's just something there that is missing from digital photography. And ghost rolls are one aspect of it. Light leaks and all these unpredictable factors that we can't really control when we're taking pictures on film. That's one reason why I like taking pictures on plastic cameras, for example, because they make life a lot more interesting in this way and often lead to failures. It's just a problem when this kind of thing happens all the time and you mess up a whole lot of rolls, which happened to me recently with my plastic cameras. And that's probably why I've been thinking about this sort of thing. So if you want to make your life a little bit more interesting and dangerous perhaps, then there's no reason to go free climbing or bungee jumping or whatever. No, just buy a film camera and see how badly you can mess up. If you shoot film, all the things that might go wrong with your pictures will go wrong eventually. That's a good thing and a bad thing. And I think it makes life a little bit more interesting. So that's one of the reasons why I like shooting film. Even though I now take digital pictures when I do want to make sure that I get the shot and have a second card slot and so on. I don't know, maybe all this is a little bit too philosophical for you. I like to think about these things, and my friends sometimes tell me that I think way too much. And yeah, maybe they're right, I don't know. But this just was on my mind recently and I thought I'd share it with you. Have you experienced any such magic in your life? Or, well, missed the magic, in fact, because it's about the pictures that you didn't take. Anyway, if you have any such stories, I would be very happy to read them because I always find that sort of thing fascinating. So if there is an elephant like that in your life, please tell me about it. I'm really curious. If you enjoyed this video, then please leave a like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. It really helps out my channel, so I would really appreciate it. In this case, I would suggest that you subscribe to my photography channel because this is where these photography videos live. I only share them with the main channel so that they get the widest possible reach. A big shout out also to my Ko-fi supporters. You make all this possible and I'm very grateful for it. If you also want to support what I do, then you can head over to Ko-fi or maybe just watch another video. There's an entire playlist of photography videos that you can watch here. And I hope I see you soon for another video. Bye!